This next fly we're going to tie will be a fur ant. This is tied on a Tiemco 100 dry fly hook. It's got a down eye as opposed to the 101 that we used for the Griffiths gnat that is the identical hook with the ring eye. Either one of those hooks is interchangeable for this pattern. In the sizes that we'll tie this, the down eye seems a little more appropriate to me, but that's purely subjective. The thread that we'll use for this is 8/0 unithread in black. This is just going to match our dubbing. I always try to match the color of the thread to the dubbing, and I like the 8/0 thread because I'm going to try to get a real tightly dubbed body, and the texture of the 8/0 thread being a little more corded than the other threads will help that dubbing adhere a bit. The hackle that we'll use in the center is black rooster neck hackle, and you could use rooster saddle hackle just as easily as long as you've got it in the appropriate sizes. I'm not going to undersize this hackle like I did on the Griffiths gnat that we just did. I'm going to use this in an appropriate size, so about 1.5 times the hook gap is the hackle size that I want to look for. So I've selected a feather here, and I'll just measure this on a bare hook just to be sure. But when I bend that feather around the hook, those hackle fibers should go again about half again the distance of the hook gap past the point. So I'm going to set this feather aside, and we'll get started on the fly. To start, just like everything else, I'm going to start the thread just behind the hook eye. I'm going to wrap a nice smooth thread base back to the bend. Now the proportions on a fur ant are a little tricky because we need to leave a space in the middle to put that hackle down. We're going to start by dubbing the back end of the fly, the abdomen, and I'm going to take a little pinch of black dubbing here. And it's going to take a little more than you think you need because we're going to build up some diameter to this. And one of the tricks to dubbing is I'll take the dubbing and I try to lay it as parallel to the thread as I can, and I'll get the top end started. Now when I twist dubbing on, you want to make sure that you only go one direction. I'm twisting from my knuckle to my fingertip to roll that dubbing onto the thread. One direction only. You don't want to twist back and forth. It's one direction. And another good tip on dubbing, when you watch someone dub, it looks like they're doing it very lightly. You want to twist that dubbing on as tightly as you can. When I'm pinching that dubbing on, I'm pinching as tight as I can possibly squeeze to really twist that dubbing around the thread. Once I've got the top end started, I can use my left hand to distribute the dubbing down the thread to keep a nice even layer, and I'll just work down the thread, twisting that dubbing on as I go. And in the case of this, trying to build a nice round abdomen, I want that as tight as I can get it. I'll bring my thread right up to the end of that dubbing loop just to keep a shorter length of thread to turn, and I'll start to build sort of an egg-shaped ball here at the back of the hook. I'm going to start at the bend. I'm going to work forward to not quite the midpoint on the hook, and then I'll put a second layer over that. And you can see as I work this dubbing on, I'm working toward the center of the bunch, avoiding the ends so that I get a nice wide taper to the fly. Now my dubbing's loosened up a little bit there, so I'll retighten it, and that's not uncommon on a long strand of dubbing. So I end up with this nice rounded back end of the fly. I want a pronounced taper back there. Now I'm going to take my hackle feather, and I've already stripped off a little bit of bare stem there, so I've got just a touch of bare stem, and I don't want to start this feather right in front of the abdomen. I want to move it a few thread turns forward and tie the feather in there. And again, I'll tie that feather in with the inside down. I'll move my thread forward just a bit, and it's not going to take a lot of hackle to float this fly, so we don't need 8 or 9 turns. I'm probably only going to go 3 or 4. I'll grab the feather in the end of my hackle pliers, and I'm going to try to make these wraps as straight up and down as I can. One turn right in front of the other. 3 or 4 turns there. And again, I'll tie that off as straight up and down as I can, and I'll trim that out, pick out any loose fibers, and I want to anchor down that feather tip with a few more turns of thread. So you can see there's a little space between the abdomen and the hackle here. I've got a little waist in between. Now I'm going to take just another little pinch of dubbing, not quite as big as the first pinch. I'm going to apply it in the same way. Just a thin, tight rope. and I want to work this on the front end of the hook. So I'm going to work right up to the back edge of the hook eye here, and then I'll start to build the front end of the ant. And in the same vein, I want to leave a space between the back end of the front and the hackle that I've got between the back end or the front end of the back. So I'm going to leave a little space there so that hackle is kind of all alone in the center, and I'll build the ball on the front end. You can see you can kind of X-wrap this dubbing back and forth a bit to build a nice pronounced ball. And as I run out of dubbing, I'm going to come right around at the hook eye so I don't have any turns of bare thread over the top of the dubbing. I'll whip finish here just behind the eye. Cinch everything down and clip the thread. Now this is a pattern that's easy to change up with a few different variations. Of course, a cinnamon ant, just cinnamon colored dubbing, maybe some brown hackle in the center. You could add a set of wings to it relatively easily. Really a simple little fly. Sits kind of low in the water. You can add a little wing to it on the top if you like. Sometimes I'll trim the hackle off the bottom to make it sit a little lower. This one's a lot of different variations from essentially just exactly this pattern with a few little twists on it. So really a simple fly, but a good one to have in your box.